What's up, guys? Hope you're doing well so far. Let's cut straight to the chase. I've been gone for a while, but here I am. I'm back now. And during that time, there were a number of interesting developments in the regard of Deltarune news and of lore, including the newsletter, which is today's video topic, and also the new Spamton sweepstakes. Lots of new sites and lots of new mysteries to be found that I'll also be covering at some point. Probably in a video also today. Maybe it's already out, so check that out as well. And this is a lot to unpack here. So with that in mind, let's get straight into the new-ish, I guess, newsletter from last week. I'll be going up here now. Hey! So here is the Deltarune May 2025 newsletter. And we start off with the release date and the time. So the time of release was a very interesting question for a while because we didn't know necessarily what time zone it was adjusted to. We now know that it is going to be 12 a.m. in Japanese time. So it'll be 12 or 0 hours in Japan on June 5th, which is actually good news for those in the West, because that means that you'll be getting it actually June 4th. So if you're like me and you're on the East Coast, it'll be out on June 4th at 11 a.m., which is pretty epic. I'll be streaming probably starting at 10 to get hyped and then play the game right at that point, so be ready for that. Check me out live when that happens. So there's not a whole lot to really take away here besides you can get the game before the Switch 2 drops, which could be a pretty funny complication. But this is just very exciting news. Like, wow, this is like Deltarune early. The day that I thought would be Deltarune tomorrow day is just Deltarune day. So that is very exciting. There's also more good news. So in a previous newsletter, there were questions about whether or not you would have to pay an upcharge to buy the game on Switch 1 and Switch 2. So some Switch 2 games, like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, for example, you can play them on Switch 2 with Switch 2 quality things, like graphics and frame rate and stuff, but you have to pay an upcharge in addition to what you paid for the Switch 1 version to transfer that over, right? And the question is, do you get to play Deltarune? You only have to pay for one copy of Deltarune to play it on Switch 1 and Switch 2. They weren't quite sure at first, but now we can say for certain that if you buy, and this also applies to PlayStation as well, if you buy Deltarune on PS4 or PS5 or the Switch 1 and Switch 2, you can play it on both consoles. So that is pretty awesome to hear. I will probably be buying the Switch 2 version at some point, just because I want to try like the special room with the mouse things. So I do intend to do that. Maybe I'll do a video about just kind of like the differences between the Steam version and the Switch 2 version at some point. That could be pretty fun. So we get a cool little drawing of Toby with Spamton in a box and a little fly flying out of it. If I received a Spamton in a box, that'd be pretty cool. My roommate has a Spamton plushie, but you probably can't see it. I don't know where it is right now, but so yeah, essentially you get to just you get off scot-free, right? Your phone is clearing up right now. Yeah, you're not missing out on anything now, except for in Japan there might be a small fee. Apparently that's local law. So once again, this is another Japan L, because we're getting the game, at 11 a.m., which is a more reasonable time of day, in my opinion. And we also are getting free both copies on both consoles for PlayStation and Switch. So the more interesting part of this newsletter to me is the trophies. So this is something that Toby mentioned in Blue Sky a while ago, is that he has to add trophies for PlayStation. It's just the way it has to be. I'm not sure if they'll have achievements on Steam, but I don't know why they wouldn't if they have PlayStation trophies. They might as well do both. Hopefully they do. But we get a small glimpse of trophies here, a small sampling of all the trophies available. And he said he does say PlayStation trophies, so maybe there won't be Steam achievements, sadly. But these are very interesting, maybe very, very interesting, you could say. I think that these are kind of like, in a more meta sense, like the chapter select screen or the save file screen, where kind of Gaster, quote Gaster, we assume it's Gaster, talks to you, or the opening of the game with the Godder Maker. This seems kind of like that in the way that it describes the achievements, and like kind of the way it talks sounds a lot like Gaster when you're like talking about the save files and stuff and like deleting them or copying them, that kind of thing. You see, Pain 4A is a bronze trophy. Receive Pain 22 times or meet an end. So this, I assume, it means that you either get hit 22 times throughout the game, or you die, right? And then, which is kind of strange. Also, the way it says receive pain is more kind of me thinking that this is going to be some kind of Gaster thing, because this is like how Gaster talks. It's also an excuse to have achievements in a meta game, because the concept of, like, or the gameplay mechanics in Deltarune and Undertale are actually important to the game itself in like a diegetic sense. So he kind of made a good choice here, I think, and I'm sure he knows what he's doing. He seemed hesitant, I think, at first to do this, but I think he has an idea here with it being more of a higher layer meta thing, that maybe like Gaster is tracking our capabilities or our happenings in the game through these achievements. So we also have Consumer 3A, consume item, armor, equip an armor, strengthen, augment your power. Now, not sure what augment your power is. Maybe it's a... See, because this is using armor. Maybe this is use or swap out your weapons. So like the spooky sword for the normal sword, for example. Maybe that's what that is. Throne, investigate the throne. I assume is just interact with the throne in chapter 1. And then chapter 3 end. Complete without issue. Now this is one that's gotten pretty interesting feedback in the community, because the phrasing here is pretty strange. Complete without issue. People have noticed that this is an anagram of the word Susie, or the name Susie, so maybe it's like complete without Susie. That one is a little bit of a stretch to me. This might also be one that's like complete without doing the alternate route, for example. It's also a goal achievement, which is pretty good. So this, I'm not sure the phrasing here is all that important, but people seem to think that it is. It's definitely strange. But this is the same guy that said receive pain 22 times instead of just take damage, so complete without issue probably just means beat the chapter. Maybe it does mean beat the chapter without doing the alternate route, but the more interesting part to me is that what do these numbers mean? Like 4A, 3A, this is like, is A for achievement? And it is like the number of the chapter? I wouldn't think that the number is the chapter, because you can do these things in any chapter for the most part. Like you can equip an armor, or consume an item, or take damage in chapter 1 even, so that's a bit strange to me. Also, I doubt that they're in this order that's shown here, because it's kind of a strange order to have them in, to do these things and then chapter 3 end. Which means that he probably intentionally placed chapter 3 end here, so that we would see this and ask questions, because this is... Yeah, actually, I'm starting to talk myself into being kind of a believer of this being kind of a weird phrasing here, but let's see what Toby says about that. There's interesting challenges, the permanence, so everyone you gain is an eternal measure of your success. That sounds like what Gaster might be measuring here, is our success eternally, right, across save files. And it says you'll only receive a trophy once the current room where you unlocked it ends. You'll miss getting it if you turn off the game before then, so be careful while completing all 4 chapters. Especially, there may be certain conditions where you will miss acquiring the chapter end trophies. I don't think it's something that an average player would run across, however. Actually, wait. With that in mind, then, complete without issue. Yeah, that does seem kind of ominous in paired with this, in tandem with this. But really, I think you'll enjoy the game more if you don't pay attention to whether you get the trophies. Yeah, maybe. Most of these seem kind of arbitrary, like equipping an armor, for example. So he kind of just did this out of obligation, it seems. This seems like a pretty honest statement, and not like a cheeky statement. I think he just means this genuinely. So, the room where you unlocked it is interesting, because, like, what if it's... For example, I understand the throne one. You inspect the throne, and then you leave the room, and then the game checks if you inspected the throne, and if you did, you got the achievement. If not, you're locked out, right? What about pain? Will I encounter an enemy, and then either die, or take my 20-second instance of damage, I guess, and then only get the achievement after I leave that room that I fought the enemy in? I'm not sure. So, We'll see how that works later on. And then we get to the interesting part, which is the Spamton sweepstakes. He finally showed us the alternate ending featuring Spamton being silenced. We chose to free him a few years ago in the sweepstakes, but here's the alternate ending, which I will talk about in a upcoming video, once again today probably, maybe already out. And with the rest of the website in mind, it makes sense why he took so long to release the silence ending, because he updated the site with links and more mysteries and interesting stuff to interact with that kind of hints towards the upcoming chapters. So he probably had that in mind for a while, didn't really forget as much as he wanted to use this as a mechanism to kind of give us some hints and some stuff to play around with, some pretty fun stuff, I would say, that I will talk about soon, which is the more interesting part here. I think the newsletter is cool, and the achievements are cool, and the complete without issue and that kind of stuff, and the exciting news about, at least in the East Coast, getting it at 11 a.m. so I can stream all day and not pull an all-nighter. That's pretty exciting as well. So that is most of the newsletter. He talks about more posts on Blue Sky and Twitter and all that, where he'll be updating us apparently. So not much more to really update us on, probably, since the game is just done and we're waiting for 3 weeks and a few days until we get to play Deltarune chapters 3 and 4, which is very exciting. It's hard for me to believe that we are already there. I say already as if it hasn't been almost 4 years. I was still, I think, early high school back then, and here I am just a few credits away from a degree. So it's pretty wild to think about how far we've come, how this game has grown with so many of us. We are so close to reaching the next chapters, and I'm very excited, and I'll be there with you guys through all of it. Expect more content, expect lots more content, especially once the game comes out and leading up to that point. But with that in mind, guys, I love you. Be safe, be smart, don't be stupid, and have a great rest of your day.